The Viltrox 23mm f1.4 is currently selling for around $270. Now, not only is that more affordable than most native Canon lenses, it's actually more affordable than most other third-party lens manufacturers' lenses as well, so let's take a closer look at this cool little lens.
Build quality is genuinely good. There's a sturdy all-metal design, and even the lens hood itself is made of metal. The lens has an aperture ring which is smooth and clickless for videographers. Also, there's a USB-C mount on the bottom of the lens for updating firmware.
And speaking of that USB port, I like it. I'm a big fan. You know, part of what keeps these lenses working so well on all these different camera systems is the firmware. You know, Viltrox has to constantly work with Sony, Canon, and Fuji, studying their autofocus algorithms so that these lenses work properly with those camera systems, and having that USB port on the back just makes it so much easier to update the firmware. It's a nice touch. Another thing that I really like is the aperture ring. You know, I grew up shooting film, so for me that just feels like right at home. I like being able to set the aperture manually on the lens itself. Autofocus on this lens is genuinely good. I'm surprised by like how fast and accurate it is. I mean, and keep in mind too, what's really impressive is they're working with three very different camera systems. I mean, you've got Canon's dual pixel autofocus, which is wildly different from Sony's phase detect autofocus, which is totally different from Fuji's autofocus system, and yet they've still managed to just get it right on all three platforms. That's genuinely impressive. Sharpness on this lens is pretty good, even wide open at f1.4, with maximum sharpness coming in around f4. Either way though, I've been shooting all of this video like wide open, and I'm really pleased with the way that it looks. I really like the colors that come out of this lens too, for both photos and stills. I mean, everything straight out of camera is sort of contrasty and well saturated, just has kind of a cool look to it. So how about using this lens for vlogging? Well, 23mm, especially on a crop sensor camera, is pretty tight. It's workable, you just need to be able to find like a long enough tripod, but yeah, you can kind of work with it. Let's talk about that 1.4 aperture. The sun has already set here, it's pretty much blue hour at this point, and yet I'm still able to film at ISO 100 because it goes all the way down to 1.4. You really will notice a difference, not just in like the shallow depth of field, but the amount of light that this lens lets in. This is definitely something you'd want to consider if you're really into like a lot of low light photo and video. So is the Viltrox 23mm f1.4 worth it? Well, it's interesting. You know, as someone who has the Canon 22mm f2 and the Sigma 16mm f1.4, much to my surprise, I've actually just been going to this lens every single day. Basically, every YouTube video, every product photos that I have to do, every B-roll that I have to shoot, I've been using this Viltrox lens and I really enjoy it. I mean, consider this, you've got excellent build quality, you've got a really cool design, you've got reliable autofocus, you have that fast 1.4 aperture, and all of that comes for a price of under $300. That's just insane. So yeah, if you are a Canon M mount user or a Sony E mount user or a Fuji X mount user, I would 100% consider this lens. You will not be disappointed. It's definitely worth the money. Anyway, I think that's all I've got for today, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.